a pleasure to welcome today as the fourth and last in our series of preachers from the congregation, Keith Carlson.
This week in social media, I saw a quote from a conversation that was with Mr. Rogers. That's from Mr. Rogers. And the question was, what do you do when you see tragedy or scary things on TV and the news? And we've had some of that this past week. And his response was, well, watch. Watch and see all the people that come to help. There's always people coming to help. So this is my prayer to start. Good morning.
Good morning.
I'm a regular at the 9 o'clock service with my wife Jill and my 3-year-old son Jasper. And truth be told, I'm probably better known as Jasper's father or Jill's spouse, but that's fine with me. Jill is far more reliable and organized, and Jasper is way cuter. So I'm okay with those associations. Jill and I are both middle school students, and we met as teachers at the school we're currently teaching at. So I guess you can say that I'm married to my middle school sweetheart. And Jasper is an energetic, enthusiastic 3-year-old, curious, and asks many questions. And right now, he is infatuated with building forts. So who's built forts before? Raise your hand. Absolutely. Who still builds forts? Very good, very good. Well, Jasper, as you may recall in your own building, he builds them out of anything he can find. Pillows, blankets, furniture. He'll turn a closet into a fort, a stand of trees in a park as a fort. These pews could be a fort. Anything that provides a perceived or real sense of enclosure, protects him and shields him from the outside world. And of course, when he builds a fort or is in a fort, we hear this call eventually. We hear, "Mommy, Daddy, come see, look, look." And we could be doing any number of things that are far more important, like me watching a football game or Jill reading a book, but we have to come where there will be the fury of a 3-year-old to deal with. But he wants us to come see, acknowledge its impressive nature, and acknowledge how great it is. So as I was preparing for this morning, I can't help but see some of that same sentiment in the disciples. They're not in a fort, but in an impressive temple, and it's being constructed when they are there. And they have every reason to be proud of it. There's a lot of impressive features to think about. The stones that made up Herod's temple were enormous. Some were 40 feet long, 18 feet high, and 15 feet wide. For those of us who are spatially challenged, from here to there is about 30 feet. I paced it off this morning. So imagine the size of those blocks. They were cut by hand out of white limestone and fit so tightly together, it was said a sheet of paper couldn't fit between them. The temple itself was 172 feet long and 20 stories high. It sat atop Mount Moriah and literally dominated the skyline of the city. It could be seen from many miles away from anywhere in that city. Now, every possible resource was brought to bear to build the structure. The doors, walls, and even the floor of the temple were overlaid with pure gold. There were jewels, ornate carvings, and many awe-inspiring sights. It was said that when the sun came up over Jerusalem, you couldn't stand to look at the temple because the light gleaming from its golden walls was so blinding. By the time of Jesus, the work had been underway for some 46 years, and it would continue for another 20. Now that's a pretty impressive fort, if you ask me. The temple that Jesus and his men visited was a truly amazing building, and like every other Jew, those men were proud that it represented their nation and their religion. So why not recognize it? One of them calls Jesus' attention to the building and its wonders. Look, Jesus, come see, isn't it amazing? Now, timing is sometimes everything. And both his question and Jesus' response are striking because of the timing of both. The disciples' question comes as they're walking out of the very temple that Jesus has been spending much of his time criticizing the workings of the established religion that take place in that very place. He hasn't really been giving a glowing endorsement of what goes on here or of the temple itself. He has a few other things going on. And so when Jesus is asked this question as a teacher, I feel a little annoyed. Students here, right? It's that moment I hear a student ask me a question about directions or a detail or a task that I've gone over many, many times. These are his students. The question suggests they don't really get it. So from that perspective, I kind of smile when I hear Jesus begin his response. What? You see these buildings? Yeah, I do. It's all going to come down. Well, that's not the response they were expecting, of course. So his timing is perfect. And as a teacher, I applaud the crafting of his reply. Now he has their attention. After a little time passes, the men are sitting on top of Mount Olives, just across the way. They have a direct panoramic view now of the city, and the temple is the dominant feature. The disciples can't hold back their curiosity. They want to know, when is this going to happen? And that question of when is one that I don't fault the disciples for. It's the same question a 3-year-old building a fort might ask when told he has to stop. Playtime's over. How long do I have left, Dad? In Jasper's case, he likes to negotiate. 5 minutes, Dad? Okay, Jasper. 5 minutes. No, wait. 3 minutes. Oh, okay, 3 minutes. No, Dad, 1 minute. Okay, he hasn't quite figured out the whole negotiation. But the question of when reflects not only a curiosity, but it points to the question of what happens after. What happens after? Often we don't really know or don't think about what's going to happen. We only focus on the when this thing is going to end. Now, if Jasper knew we were going to the park or going to the ice cream store or someplace more exciting, he might spend time getting his shoes on, getting ready to go. If we're going to school, maybe getting his backpack ready. But the preoccupation with the end keeps his attention focused on the question of how much time is left. His anxiety not only reflects the end of the fort, but perhaps that he doesn't fully understand what happens after the fort comes down. These disciples, not surprisingly, are similar. They want to know and they feel the same. But following the question of when, it gets a little more awkward. Jesus goes apocalyptic. He lays down prophecy of impending destruction. And if you really break it down, this whole exchange is pretty unexpected. Can you imagine asking someone a rather rhetorical question and getting some kind of crazy response like this? Maybe example. Excuse me, isn't this Southern California weather incredible? It's amazing.
This is the last sunny day you will ever see. All warmth of Southern California will be frozen from existence.
Could you tell me when this is going to happen?
Destruction and global geopolitical anarchy will follow. And oh, by the way, this is just the beginning.
So I don't fault the disciples for wanting to know when the temple will come. Christians have taken this text for years and tried to predict when the end times will be. It's a natural curiosity. How many of us want to know what tomorrow holds? How many of us want to avoid trauma, conflict, or tragedy? Of course, all of us would like to have the opportunity to stop the events, such as the one that brought pain and sorrow to Paris, Baghdad, Beirut, just this past week. We would like to have the chance to shelter places like Nepal, Southeast Asia, from the earthquakes this past summer, or preempt the conflict in the Middle East that has gone on for generations. There are certainly more personal struggles. Can I know what will cause pain to my loved ones so I can protect them? Can I hear about the future ailments I will battle so I can avoid them? Each one of us can imagine a tragic event, past or future, personal or public, that we want to prevent or avoid. So I don't fault the disciples for their question of when. But they missed the point. They missed the point that Jesus is really making. The signs that Jesus gives them aren't really signs of the end. War, famine, earthquakes, false messiahs, these were all common concerns then, and events then, and they are events that happen now. They've come and gone. The world is still here. Just last night I was watching Charlie Brown with Jasper. And if the episode's familiar with you, it's the one where Charlie Brown is at a spelling bee. Charlie Brown wants to win because he's lamented how he never wins anything. Ever. Ever. He's to the last two. He only has to spell one more word correctly. Beagle. If he spells Beagle, he gets to win the spelling bee. All of his friends are watching. B. E. A. G. E. L. Yes, that's wrong. Charlie Brown goes home distraught. He doesn't want to go to school the next day. He's so disappointed in himself. He's embarrassed. The world is ending. But his friend Linus comes to get him, wants him to come to school. Charlie Brown refuses. And Linus is leaving his house. He turns back to Charlie Brown and says, Charlie Brown, did you notice? The world didn't end. The world didn't end. One commentator writes that Jesus is not predicting the future. He's really speaking of the precariousness of the present. These signs, and the signs we see today, are signs of our broken world. God's promise doesn't include a life without struggle. God promises to be present in that struggle. God's design works within this broken world, not without pain and suffering, but in the midst of it. Jesus is the flesh and bone of that promise. And so the last sentence of this text gives us the biggest clue to that promise. We are in the birth pangs. So for all you mothers out there, you know the trade-off. Birth is not without pain. But you don't have to have given birth to know this. Just ask anyone who's struggling or unable to conceive, or dealing with the loss of a child. The natural process of birth is a struggle. Now, I talked with Jill about this, and she can't remember much of Jasper's birth, but she can remember the moment when she felt like she couldn't do it. Well, I, absent of pain, remember all of it. I was there. I remember kneeling next to her, wanting to take the pain away, but I also remember feeling tremendously hopeful. Those birth pains she was experiencing would lead to a new life, lead to our son. And I'm blessed to be able to see evidence of that in Jasper every day. Our world, our neighbors, are in the midst of birth pangs of life. We can't take away all the pain or prevent all the suffering. But we can come alongside those who are in birth pangs. We can remind one another of the hope and promise we find in Jesus. And in the meantime, we can be prepared to be the hands and feet of Christ, to see the hope when others cannot, to point others to Jesus in a world that often seems scary and apocalyptic. If you need that hope today, I offer that to you and know that this community stands with you in your pain and in your struggle. A season of gratitude can be exceptionally lonely if hope is hard to find. In this closing sermon series of the season of gratitude, I hope that we can look for our opportunity to share the hope of Jesus with our hands, with our feet, our words, our time, our talents, our presence. As we enter the season of Advent, we're reminded here in this text by Jesus to be prepared to see the hope of new life in him. This temple, this world, is not as stable or eternal as it might appear. Sometimes what we call death is, in the hands of God, birth. In the words of another preacher, only one living God can bring out life out of death. Only one living God can make the end the beginning.